I'm starting this over.
I think you need to start that over,
I forgot to
I
mute.
thought he had this plan. Let me do it.
Shh. No, I'm doing it, okay?
You pulled a Rianne Johnson.
Right.
You had an opportunity and you blew it.
Shut up.
You're showing your cards, Hodges.
Sort of.
Shut up. Hello and welcome to the Good, Bad, or Bullshit podcast. The only podcast where we consider conversation the foundation for higher thought. The only other podcast was one many, many years ago by a Russian guy, according to Mike. Joining me, well, first of all, I'm Bo Schwartz. I'm one of the hosts, and I am the original trilogy Luke Skywalker of this podcast. That's right. And joining me is the sequel trilogy Luke Skywalker of this podcast, Michael Hodgins. Hello, Michael. Hello.
Oh, to the point of it all.
Those texts. And also joining us is the C-3PO of this podcast, Crofton Steers. Crofton, hello.
Hey, how's it going? So, I wasn't able to intro the show, so you could rip off my intro format using examples I've pretty much used in the past.
True, it's your format. You came
well,
up
I
with
can
it.
kind of understand. At this point, Crofton, we know that it's like you're going to make yourself the best thing. You're going to make me something weird, and then you're going to slam Bo. So I can understand why he's like, you know what? I want to slam Crofton.
And I've been waiting to do that all day, my friend, so.
Fair.
Hey, C-3PO, to his credit, is very good at calculating odds. Nobody wants to hear them, but he's very good at calculating them.
And in the sequel trilogy, he has a red arm. Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
And like most things in that trilogy, remains unexplained.
Okay, so listeners, if you are still here after that really weird opening, we are a show that usually takes a random topic, debates its merits, and gives it a verdict of good, bad, or bullshit. But needless to say, Star Wars is a pretty big cultural phenomenon. So big that we've actually done an episode on Star Wars in the past. And the three of us have decided, we've all seen it individually. We haven't had a chance to talk about our feelings. And we said, you know what, we're going to save it and do it on the show. So no random topic this week. This week, we're just going to lay it out there. No preamble, no foreplay. We are talking about the frickin' Star Wars The Last Jedi, Episode 8. Just came out. We've all seen it. And we're going to review it, good, bad, or bullshit style, with one of those verdicts each. And I'm looking forward to talking about this.
So needless to say,
movie.
There will be spoilers. This is not a spoiler-free discussion. So this is a massive spoiler discussion. So consider this last exit here, because past this and probably a couple of sentences hereafter, we're going to go deep into spoiler territory.
Yeah.
So if you have not seen the movie, do not listen to the show. Listen to it later, after you've seen the movie.
Yeah, that's good advice, Crofton. And so without further ado, we've said the spoiler bit. We've said what we're doing. I need some initial reactions.
Well, I think this is appropriate because it's the holidays. We're taking a holiday from a random topic, and I'm excited to do this because I saw this movie before you two guys, and it was really hard not to spoil it for you both, but I did my best. And so I've been craving this moment because I've been wanting to chat about it. I've been bugging my wife. So you saw it
first. I have questions. I want to know. Well, you seem like you want to say things, but I want you to answer a question for me about the movie.
Okay.
Okay. So
thanks for not letting me tell you what I was going to say, but go ahead.
All right. Go ahead. All right. You tell me then. It seems important.
Well, it wasn't even. It's just more like, so I watched this movie and I left, and then you guys will recall that I sent you a little message on our chat where all I wrote was, "Oh man," and ...
Mm-hmm.
Because I was the movie, I was like, I don't know what I think about this, and it dominated my thoughts for like 24 hours, and I would bug my wife. I'd be staring off in the distance. She's like, "Are you thinking about Star Wars?" I'm like, "Yes." I'm still thinking about Star Wars, and I'm still kind of processing it. So it wasn't like it was a weight on me, this movie.
Okay. So, well, that's what I wanted to get at. Right when the credits roll, the lights come up, what is going through your head? Were you smiling? Did you smile
when you first get hit with the Star Wars thing?
No, when the credits come up, the movie's finished. The lights come up?
No.
Are you smiling? Are you?
So,
end. Sorry, I missed it.
So contextually, for me, to answer your question in the most long-winded way possible, I saw the movie well after I knew that there was a furor around the movie. So I saw it I saw it yesterday for the first time. And so I knew there was a lot. I was avoiding it online. The one thing I couldn't avoid is that it was divisive. Critics had come out earlier. I checked the Rotten Tomatoes score. I knew it had done extremely well. I was excited. I also have voiced to you guys on multiple occasions, including on the show, on the Star Wars episode, that the entire idea of a new trilogy focused on Skywalker, Solo, Leia, all of that stuck in my craw the wrong way. I felt they could have gone in a complete different direction, done a whole new thing with no baggage whatsoever. The fact that they've shown what's happened for the past 30 years since the happy ending of Return of the Jedi, all of that is, for me, was depressing when I saw The Force Awakens, which is genuinely a joyful movie, The Force Awakens, for the most part, aside from the death of Han Solo and all that. But it still has this overtone of like a lot of bad shit has happened to these characters that you like for the past 30 years. It felt to me like this was the movie where everybody finally got that. I was so that didn't surprise me. So when I watched the movie, and knowing that there was the furor going on, I was determined to be like, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy this movie. I'm going to enjoy it like a Star Wars, like a kid. I don't want to be a 37-year adult. I want to go in there and enjoy it like a kid and be like, this is awesome. So I walk in, and the movie starts, and the very first scene in the movie is super awesome. So it has like an X-wing going down on this new dreadnought class ship and taking out all its cannons and just flying through it with this hotshot pilot and all that sort of stuff. Really awesome. I'm like, I'm totally in, and I'm like, oh man, I can just check out. I'm like, I can just have a good time here. This is going to be awesome. And then the next scene, they pretty much go to the end of The Force Awakens with Luke meeting Rey, the main character of that movie. And, he's a curmudgeon-y old guy, much in the way Yoda kind of was on Dagobah and Empire Strikes Back. He immediately throws the lightsaber away, which seemed like a little bit of a defiance of expectations, which is where the movie was going to go a lot further. And I was still on board. I was like, oh, man, this is great. But right around that point, I started thinking a lot. My brain started working a lot while I was watching the movie. And I kept telling my brain, shut up. I'm like, let me just enjoy this movie. Let me just be like, this is, But then I started thinking about things a lot. And I couldn't stop. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And there were moments where I'd be like, man, this scene is awesome. And I was really into it. But I kept thinking about things. And when to get to your answer, Bo, when it came up, I didn't have a smile on my face and it wasn't due to Luke dying, who I had come to terms with as soon as this thing was going to start. I knew he was dead. It had a lot to do with just like I had parsed so much of this movie in my mind already, and I was like thinking to myself, there's some major problems here, and the biggest problem of them all is that I am not able to enjoy this movie as an adult anymore without seeing all these things on a first viewing. And that is more of a problem probably to do with me and being an adult and less to do with the actual Star Wars movie. And that's what frustrated me when I walked out, because I enjoyed it. Pardon me, I'd be like, oh yeah, I enjoyed lots of individual bits of it too. But my brain was working too hard, and I realized if I was young me, that wouldn't have happened. My brain wouldn't have been working like that. I would have just enjoyed it, And I'm not sure how much problem that is with the movie and how much
keep
that's
in
a
mind
problem.
Before arguments start, I have to get my impression in, unless you wanted to continue.
I didn't give mine, did I? But anyways, go ahead.
Well, yeah, your connection got. Well, we were asking you what happened when the lights went up. I thought.
Yeah, well, I'll go after you.
You went already.
But I thought you just said my connection shot. So what? Okay, that's
yeah, we caught most of it. No, fine. We don't know. No.
Ahead.
You go ahead. I want you to go ahead.
No. You were gonna start.
All right. I enjoyed the movie as like the way Crofton said. I thought it was a lot of fun while I was watching it. I looked over at my family members during the viewing, being like, "Hey, this is cool, right?" There's a lot of that movie was really fun to watch. But I don't know about you, but my experience of the movie started after seeing it, which was like, I kept thinking about the movie and it kept pissing me off. And I had sleepless nights thinking about this movie. And I haven't really felt that way about a movie. Now, keep in mind, I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it like I enjoyed another movie this year, Blade Runner. I enjoyed it while I was watching it, and then Star Wars, this new one, and then when I was done with it, I've been wrestling with how I feel about it ever since, up until this point. Which is actually a really new experience for me. So that's, I left, I smiled like, that was good, let's go. And then everyone started talking about the movie outside of the theater, and then the more we talked about it, the more we were like,
Yeah. I mean, my general impression right after was not one of, I wasn't smiling, I was like, it probably had a scowl on my face, and not one of oh, it was distasteful, but one of almost kind of confusion of I don't feel good is just how I thought. But I also had that at the end of The Force Awakens too, in the same way that I think Crofton articulated, where it's I've come around to his way of thinking. I didn't start that way of why didn't they just leave well enough alone? And it's a little bit like what I appreciate what Crofton was saying is look, if it was young me and I was just watching this movie, I wouldn't have these same feelings that I have now. But the fact is, that situation is it would never have existed because there are, 6 other movies that precede these ones. So if you want to discount the prequels, which I'm happy to do because nobody likes them that much, but there is baggage there. There just is. And it's if you take your kid to see this movie and they never saw anything else Star Wars related before, sure. But then at some point they might go back and watch this and be like, oh yeah, those other movies were good. Well, potentially. There's more there. You know what I mean? When you watch the original trilogy, that's it. And I always think that with some of these things, part of the magic of franchises like this, like so many of them, is what you don't know is where I think a lot of the magic comes from. And the more you fill in those details, the more that starts to break apart a little bit. And I think that's a little bit what's happening here. There's too much Star Wars, and I like it and I wanted to see more, but the one thing that I was certain of was that they were never going to please everyone with this movie. That was, I think everybody knew that. They were going to please some people, not everybody. And it didn't please me. And I'm not saying that I wanted it to just be oh yeah, Luke Skywalker just kicks ass and is the best, but it's more there was stuff established. It's like you're playing a game or something, or starting something new, and someone gives you a whole bunch of valuable resources, and then you just put them in the toilet. Okay. It's kind of why wouldn't you exploit those resources and exhaust them? That doesn't mean that you can't use them to put over new things. You can, but exhaust those resources. I felt like they were too eager, and I would say that in the Force Awakens, the death of Han Solo, I think, was well poised. There's no secret that Harrison Ford wanted out, and I think it worked well and would have propelled the series. But to have killed Luke Skywalker, it seemed wholly pointless. I just want to get to this right away. It's wholly pointless, and in the sense that I'm a little bit okay, Kylo Ren, he's wanted one thing, to kill Luke Skywalker, and Luke Skywalker's okay, I'll just kill myself. So it's mission accomplished, Kylo Ren, and you were never at any risk because all I did was show you an image to give 30 people a chance. There were so many problems with that outcome.
Yeah, let's
irritate.
Let's scale it back because I've had a lot of time to think about this.
Why? I'm going to jump right into that.
No, not because you have a long turn, and And I've spent a long time thinking about this as well, and I've distilled it to the one thing. The movie's good. The thing that I find frustrating about the movie is that I enjoyed it. I want to watch it again. I thought there were some really great moments in it. I liked when Luke looked at C-3PO, and C-3PO goes, "Master Luke," and he just winks at him. Like, there's these kind of like awesome little moments in there that are nods to things. But fundamentally, if you're looking at Force Awakens and this movie, I like what they did with Han. You know, they had problems with their kid. Instead of dealing with it, Han goes out smuggling and, you know, doing, like, it's that seemed consistent with what a shittier version of their future might look like. He runs away. I love what they've done with Leia. She's become a general. She has a coven of believers. She's always kind of had a backbone or been a strong, determined person in the original trilogy, which was, so she continues that on in some respect here. And what disappointed me about this movie is that they didn't write Luke right. I went to StarWars.com today, and I filled out a questionnaire. It tells you what character you are. Okay? And I even tweeted, I didn't tweet it, I shared this in our Slack earlier today. It said to me, "You're Luke Skywalker based on the answers." And they described him, "If you had it your way, you'd spend your days in a cave meditating. But when others need your help, you'll always do what's right." That's Luke. Luke, in the original series, had to face Space Hitler in the entire Empire. And he said, "You know what? I'm just going to show up and I turn him because I believe. And I'm going to do the right thing, whether or not it's going to get me killed and blah, blah, blah." And, okay, I liked the story part about where, listen, Kylo's a bad egg. Maybe they do have to kill him and they have to confront it. Everything up to that point, I'm like, okay, he has a moment of weakness. I'm with this. But the moment he starts being oh my God, I can't save or help or do anything. Yeah. Let me go be. That is not
Luke was
Luke
always
Skywalker.
tempted towards the dark side in the original trilogy. They show the temptation,
but
he resists it. But he always is like,
yeah,
sure,
and
like he's some immaculate person who can't be tempted to the dark side.
But he goes and hides himself in an aisle. I hated that. Hang on. Let me be selfish. Okay, it's been like decades since the original trilogy. We're actually getting Luke Skywalker back for these films. Force Awakens comes out. Finally get to see Luke. No Luke. You got to wait one whole other movie, extra 2 years. And you know what that made me feel like as an expectation? Oh, man. It's good. When Luke comes here, it's going to be good because they're not even going to use him in movie 1. It's going to be incredible. Movie 2 comes around. He's a big-ass sissy. And he doesn't even have the balls to face Kylo in person. He uses a forced trolling maneuver where he pretends he's really there but not. And like, it is the worst thing I could possibly imagine for Luke. And I hated it. And I hate it now.
Okay, no, that point.
All right, I got it out of my system. That's
well, okay. Let's touching on something. I agree with you basically, and a couple points that are, I think, key to who Luke is, and this is why I'm peeved at Rian Johnson for writing for writing Luke this way. You should have spelled it right then. Anyways, so it's like what you said about Luke, and you look at Empire Strikes Back. It's like he leaves his training early because his friends need help. He's not ready. He goes and does it. Return of the Jedi. He's in the throne room. The Emperor, who can kind of see into his mind, says to him, he says, Luke Skywalker says, "Your overconfidence is your weakness." And he says, "Your faith in your friends is yours." It's who Luke Skywalker is. Yeah. Is that if his friends need help, he will go and help them, whether he's ready, whether he is going to be sacrificed. That's who that character is. Now, I'm all for characters change, and I get that's what they're going to do. And I could see, he tries to start this. A lot of the backstory I'm all okay with. He tries to start a Jedi Academy. It goes awry. The dark side is present. The moment of weakness, yes, I'm all for that. I agree with Crofton. He's a person with those temptations. He's worked to overcome them. I like that about him. But this whole okay, I'm done. Never again will I help anyone. I'm like, I just don't. It's one of the bases of his character, and I don't believe that it's crushed by that one moment.
Combination of two things. It's his character, and also it's the only 2 hours of Luke Skywalker I'm going to get in That's it.
The selfish part of me too.
That's all I get. Fuck you. Like, fuck you. Like,
and I was thinking, like, so again, the Rian Johnson, I'm peeved at, and I feel like this is what. Have you guys ever done the improv?
Yeah.
Okay, so improv. You're doing an improv scene with somebody. There's ways to do it to make it all work. Which is, if someone starts something, you kind of work with it and you go ahead. If you want to be a dickhead and you're doing improv, you cut off all the leads that person started, and then you take in a completely different direction. That's how to ruin improv.
I see what you're getting at.
And I just feel a little bit like that's what Rian Johnson did, where J.J. Abrams, whether you like what the direction he pointed it or not, he pointed in a few directions, and Rian Johnson was like, all right, F you, I'm going this direction. And it was like, okay. And I felt like he had to really twist things to make that work. And I think, and he was only doing it to exert more control, because I don't think ultimately, like, some of these things I thought were a stretch. It was like he just quashed a whole bunch of kind of seeds that J.J. Abrams had planted. And even if he wanted to take it in a different direction, he could have done it in a better way than what he did. Like, I mean, everyone says the Ray thing, where he's just like, oh, your parents are nobody. Okay, nobody. You know, that's
not for sure, though.
Well, this is what I'm saying. So I think in the next movie, it's possible, like, it's J.J. Abrams again, who might be like, you know what? And again, this is like bad improv, where it's like someone has just ruined all your leads, and then you come back in and say, I'll just undo your things. I mean, in some ways, Luke, maybe he's not dead. You know, you could be that. That
maybe he teleported somewhere.
No, he'll be a Force ghost in the next one. We know that.
But
that's a guarantee.
But we've been going on long enough. I want to get Crofton to weigh in on
what
he thought about
it's very difficult to get in here, but
we got to moderate a little bit. So go ahead.
I will say that I almost disagree entirely with the Luke Skywalker stuff. It's, to me, it's like you guys should have known this at the end of the last movie. Like, they did it already with Han Solo. They've done it. In terms of like where the characters have been, they needed a reason for him being somewhere for the past 30 years. For you to expect that he was exiled for an island for 30 years, self-exiled, made himself really hard to find. The whole goal of The Force Awakens was to discover a map. And then in The Last Jedi, he didn't want anyone to find him? Oh, he's out, by himself? Like, I mean, like that, I knew that I got the exact Luke Skywalker that I expected. That said, I agree that it's like, it's a bit of a slap in the face if your entire reason for investing in these Star Wars movies is these characters, right? And I can get that. But my bigger problems with the movie was when I started thinking about it as a movie, and I started thinking about it being like, okay, let's imagine for a second that Luke Skywalker is just some legendary Jedi, John Smith, legendary Jedi John Smith, and the whole that there is no Leia, that there's no, like, maybe there's R2 and C3PO and they're connected, but they do a whole new story, and it's about going to get this reclusive Jedi and all that, and it's not Luke Skywalker. It's just some guy, but like the whole plot is the same, or more or less. They just don't use people from our childhood. I'm like, so I to detach myself.
I see what you're saying. If it was like if it was Ian McKellen or something.
Yeah, let's say they made this whole series take place 3,000 years in the future or whatever. Yeah. There's still a Kylo Ren. There's still all these characters.
But the actors we know are not played by them, and they're not those characters. They're not those characters. It's a Jedi Master Gandalf who's exiled. Who's on Duke Ground
who's on some. But the plot is the same. They have to go get this Jedi Master to come back and to help and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. So that separates you from all this sort of emotional baggage, and then you start thinking. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, and that stuff didn't catch me up as much as I thought. What really caught me up was the actual plot of the film. And there were some things that I liked. Like, I did like the concept of, instead of it being another Death Star, instead of it being whatever, it's about them running out of gas. Although the logistics of that were very troublesome, where I was like, okay, so let me get this straight. There's these Star Destroyers, and they have TIE fighters that can only fly a certain distance. But because the ships keep flying away from them, they're not fast enough to follow at regular speed, but they can't go at hyperspeed. And anyway, like when you get into it, you're like, oh man, this is a real big stretch. But bottom line is, it's the slowest chase imaginable until the fuel runs out on the ship.
It's kind of a space siege, right?
I can go with that. Let's go with it, a la Battlestar Galactica or something. Like they're going in their cruiser and they're running out of fuel. I'm okay. But then they have this whole storyline that's about 1/3 of the Force Awakens cast and this new character, Rose, who like and Finn and all this. They go on this mission to get this crypto, hacker on this casino planet and all this, and I'm on board for it. Like, I love Star Wars for these big worlds and this big stuff, and this crypto stuff. Like, sounded like a cool concept. I was on board, but then, like, at one point, when I realized, like, because it's all like a trap or whatever. Benicio del Toro's character, who I don't think even has a name in the film,
it's DJ.
Just sort of leads them in to getting caught and all this, and then I'm like, okay, but this is all going to play out somehow, right? Like all these things are going to connect, but they really don't. Like, I was looking at it and I'm like, the only outcome of that storyline, and this is a sort of a stretch that you can make, is that at the very end of the film, they have to demonstrate how the Resistance, how Luke Skywalker, how they're becoming an icon in the galaxy, how they're becoming known. And they have this child who is on this casino planet before racing these sort of horse equivalents, and they show him be impassioned and by it, and maybe that's a little bit of a payoff for the whole storyline, but it didn't really make sense. So that's one major storyline, and then the storyline between Rey, Kylo, and Luke, I thought was more or less the strongest part of the movie, and like assuming Luke's like some wizened Jedi master, like the whole back and forth and all that. But then even the throne room scene with Smoke and all that, and to Mike's point about the bad improv, it definitely did feel like a film that was written in response to internet theories about the first film. Now, J.J. Abrams is notorious for planting mysteries and never resolving them in all his products, including Lost and all this sort of stuff. So, like, who's Rey's parents? Who is Smoke? What Smoke's...
Snoke.
How did he get
Snoke,
to
not
be
Snoke?
Excuse me. How did he get to be where he is? It doesn't matter. Like, is what Rian Johnson is saying. Like, these are just characters that are like meant to be played with for the development of the core characters in his mind, like the Kylo Rens and what have yous. And so, like, for me, there was a lot of scenes that I liked, and I really admired the ability to take risks, because there was a lot of risks taken in this film. It just didn't work necessarily for me on the nostalgia level, and we talked about nostalgia last episode, and it didn't really work for me on the actual logistically plotting level. And I get maybe there's a message there that not everyone's a hero, and not everybody can, like, like Poe took over the bridge and is like doing this thing, and you think as the viewer that he's right, and then he gets stunned and there's this bait and switch played, and oh no, this lady who was just introduced this movie, she's the hero, and now she's dead and we don't care about her anymore. Like, and Admiral Akbar dies in one shot on the bridge, but like they don't really care about him. There's just a lot of weird plotting.
Plot holes, frankly, and to the thing about, there's a couple things that I'm going to forget them all as I talk, but like, so his thing about like Snoke and making it not who cares who he is, like that's not true. Like, whether or not you explore it in the movie, it is important to know where he came from. And I approach this from I mentioned before that I had studied screenwriting. I went to school for that for a bit, and writing in general. And one thing people will tell you who know about writing or whatever, you can have if you're writing something, you need to know. So in theory, somebody knows whoever wrote these characters, they should know
who
Snoke is.
It's gonna be a comic book or a novelization. Like, we'll get that story.
Well,
eventually.
no, but I mean, but the point is, it's not about someone later on novelizing it and making up themselves. The people who put that character there, they should know exactly how he did. And George Lucas knew about how Palpatine came to power, and that's what made it mysterious. And in the first movies, you don't know anything about the Emperor. He reveals it all in the prequels, but George Lucas has that story in his head, because if you're writing something like that, you need to know it. And you'll hear people like George R.R. Martin talk about this stuff in Game of Thrones, where there's all these characters that you only see a snippet of. He knows their backstories. He knows those details. They're important, whether or not you ever explore them. And I feel like Rian Johnson made a point of cheap writing, in the sense that, like, I feel like it's clear that not only has he not honored things that were publicly known about some of these characters, it feels like he also just snubbed some of what was laid out as implied in The Force Awakens. And I felt like he didn't do a good job of putting a kind of cap on them. Like, again, he didn't have to tell us where Snoke came from, but I think he was just being cheap, like the bad improv of just like, get rid of him, doesn't matter. Her parents are nobodies, doesn't matter. It was just like he sloughed them off because he was focused on it was like plot without knowing the backstory is weak.
Before
and
we
I think
get
it
too
shows
deep
through.
Before we get too deep into the pretension, though, Star Wars doesn't have good plot. like I mean, we can't hold it to this standard. Like, its plot was bad. Like the other movies aren't riddled with plot holes. Like,
because I would disagree.
Not the point.
It has strong structure, and it always has. The first three movies are a classic 3-act structure. The first film is a classic hero's quest. It's structurally plot, very well structured and sound. And so, and what I would say to you, Bo, is that I have seen, it's true. And if you look at the structure of story, you would see that it's actually quite well put together. Some of the prequels maybe less so, but what I would say is I've seen some headlines around this, and they kind of infuriated me. And this is kind of backs up what you're going to say, was I saw a few headlines, different places saying this is the most intellectual Star Wars movie, this one. And I was like, okay, it's not an intellectual franchise. That's not what it has never been that. It's never tried to be that. It's been adventure and swashbuckling and fantasy. That's what it's tried to be. And then to try to make it intellectual, like him introducing this stuff about like, oh, look, the people in the casino, they play both sides. They're selling arms. I'm like, yeah, all right. You're trying to like bring the shades of gray. You're trying to Game of Thrones up Star Wars. I'm like, it's not that. It never was. It was like there's dark and there's light and there's tension between them. And I mean, I can appreciate that in certain places, but that's not what Star Wars ever tried to be. And I feel like him alone, Rian Johnson, is like, Johnson. I'm gonna make it this now.
Now I disagree with that too. Although I would say in this movie it's been in your face, but like the prequels were rife with the American Empire allegory, and and it's less obviously in the original trilogy, but the Empire was intended to represent the United States and their warmongering ways. But that's less obviously painted than in the prequels. Like that undertone is there. I agree with you. It's heavy.
I always thought in the original trilogy they were all British. They were meant to represent the British Empire, and the rebels were the Americans.
George Lucas is American. Like, it's America. It's clearly the Republic. Come on. Like, they're both literally called the Republic.
No, I'm just saying in the first movie, the evil empire is the closest, if real world thing, is the British Empire, not the American.
I mean, you probably could fit both. I think it's at its most subtle in the original trilogy. I've only read a few things mentioning that was contained in source treatments or something like that. But like, it's clearly in your face in the prequels, and it's now here too. I'm not saying I liked it anymore. Like, Mike, you're right that like I found it irritating that it was like, oh, here we've got all the true villains, the ones who are apathetic. Like, so what are you saying? Kylo Ren's not that bad? It's like, these people are not, they're citizens. They make weapons, but leave them the hell alone. They're not bad guys. They're opportunists. And like, so are you at war with them too now, Rebels? Like, and Mike's point is that it has nothing to do with Star Wars, which I agree. It's got nothing to do with the Star Wars.
I also agree, and I also agree that was heavily the shades of gray concept was heavily brought in the prequels. That was something that they were like, oh, you know, and I've never been a fan of shades of gray in Star Wars, and also I really do feel like Mike used the term like a Star Wars movie for intellectuals or whatever. I think this is a Star Wars movie being made for adults. Because say what you will about the prequels, they were made for kids, right? Like when you know, Phantom Menace came out, and people had been busting for a Star Wars movie forever, and then it's like Gungans getting their heads zapped in pod racers or whatever. People were rolling their eyes and being like, "Oh, this is annoying." But these movies are clearly being made for fanboys, in, you know, at top of mind. The fact that both the Snoke thing and the Rey's parents thing, the two big dangling mysteries after The Force Awakens that had the internet abuzz or whatever, were both handled in the way that they were handled, shows to me that the writing of this, and while Rian Johnson was the you know, he's the main guy, Kathleen Kennedy and the Lucasfilm group, they oversee all this. He couldn't have done anything that he wanted to do without their green light. So they were, you know, more than aware of what was going on.
He has the only credit
as a writer, yes.
Yeah.
But he needs to get permission to do these things.
Sure,
right?
but
like,
I mean, there was, I think, 3 writers on the last one.
Yeah. Oh, potentially.
Yeah, but it's just, this is like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, you have people on the director-writer credits, but the production house is taking a lot of control.
It's being overseen and managed, and I just think that it's a movie being like, these things obviously are corporate monstrosities. We all know that. This one, I just felt from one viewing, and I've only had one viewing, felt sloppy, and in the plotting. Because getting back to the plotting, if you watch like Empire Strikes Back and you clip out any individual scene, you could say that this scene has purpose. This is where it's going. This is where things are. This is how the plot is advancing. You know, there's a bunch of scenes in this last movie that if you just show me this scene and said, like, you could clip this entire scene out of the movie, would it change anything? I'd probably say no. You know, like there was a bunch of scenes where I was like, this scene is pointless. Really doesn't do anything. And I will be honest, I felt that movie was overlong. And I'm not somebody who checks his watch as much during movies, but this was the one, and especially during the Star Wars movie. But like the throne scene in Return of the Jedi, which they played beat for beat in the elevator using the exact same language as Return of the Jedi, is the culmination of that film. But in this film, it is not. It's like there's a throne room scene. There's a big battle with guards, like Imperial guards. Like, that was awesome. It's not.
By the way, you guys have been shitting on the throne room scene. I think it's the best part of the movie.
It is a good scene. I like that one. I didn't shit on that one.
I just think, like, again, it's like I guess it's a good scene in terms of like visual splendor. I have to say right now that this movie looks amazing, possibly the best Star Wars has ever looked. The cinematography, the colors, everything, the planets, the creature design, just amazing. Like, always looked nothing shy of stellar. But in the throne room, instead of 2 characters, like in Return of the Jedi, you may recall when the Emperor sort of was getting down to business with Luke and Vader, he signaled to his Imperial Guard and they walk out. They get in the elevator and they leave. The idea is like, getting back to Mike's improv theater / analogy, it's like your extras get off the set, right? So here, yeah, you have this wicked scene after Snoke gets smoked, where they end up like Kylo and Rey start, you know, fighting all these Emperor's guards, and it's all wicked and all this.
It's the Praetorian Guard.
But they serve no purpose. They're extras. They have no character. They're only there to have like an awesome fight scene, which is fine, whatever.
Yeah, and they almost killed them.
Because like, if they didn't have that, there'd literally be no saber fight scene. Because
no, there would be.
Exactly.
That's a problem with plotting.
The end one. I know. I guess you're right. Your point is that it's a problem with plotting. I like the plotting of Kylo knowing he knew that Snoke was connecting them somehow, and he used the situation to assassinate him effectively, which I thought was a fun part of the movie.
I'm not opposed to that either. Like, I mean, and I agree a lot with Crofton. There's a lot of sloppiness in this movie, and it's to this point about the scene. It's like if you're again writing a screenplay when you're going through it, I assume this thing was edited. But anyone who should be reading anything is like, if this scene is not progressing the plot in it or building a character, you get rid of it, period. And I feel like they kept the whole tacked on casino thing, which you could almost remove that whole part and the movie would be cleaner, to keep
being busy
John Boyega's character. Yeah. And it's like, look, I like that character. He was not integrated well into this film. He could have been, he was not. And the fact that whole thing was for naught anyways, like, I mean, I felt with
that whole thing, it was important part of the Poe story, which I felt was good. Because Poe was like...
the Poe story related more to what was happening in the real moment. The Finn side adventure...
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. The side adventure failing, being like, I think probably unnecessary, that had an important impact on Poe. Because Poe effectively killed most of the fleet, due to his hastiness to... Yeah. In the original trilogy, I appreciated this part, the effort at least. Let's say maybe it was well plotted or not. I appreciated the effort of, don't tell me the odds, kid, of the first movie, where this movie was like, yeah, you should know the odds because you shouldn't do shit that have bad odds because that makes you a shitty leader. Well, which maybe I don't want in my Star Wars, right? I'm not watching Dunkirk or some war movie. I'm watching laser swords and armor guys. But like... his storyline was essentially that, Laura Dern ends up having to do what she does. She was awesome in this, by the way, but I really liked her character. But that whole scenario ends up happening out of Poe's,
her character. I had a huge beef with her character. Nothing to do with her personally. It just felt so superfluous in this. It was like it
had to get Leia to spacewalk. That was really important.
Let's remove the entire leadership contingent and have some random character that we just created who is going to die later on. Like,
I thought that was good. I thought that was good.
So my other issue.
They also baited you to hate her. And then made you feel like an asshole when you're wrong. And I'm like,
because they're putting you in Poe's perspective. That's how Poe feels. Poe's like, who's this new biatch in the place? We have to undermine her because she's not being constructive.
That's true, Bo. And that's something that drove me nuts because, and again, back to Mike's issue with the bad improv. So one thing that The Force Awakens did amazing, my huge beefs with The Force Awakens, and a lot of people have beefs about it not taking enough risks. And my big beef was the fact that it existed at all. That was my big thing, that it revealed what happened and all these people had shitty lives. That annoyed the hell out of me. But aside from that, what I thought it did a wondrous job of was building characters that I was immediately into and invested in. The one that felt a little bit out of place was Poe Dameron. And the reason for that was because he had an opening scene in that Force Awakens. He then crashes with him and Finn have this awesome escape scene. And then the ship crashes and he's gone for a huge chunk of the movie. So Finn and Rey and Kylo Ren come out as these fresh new characters, and Poe gets a little shine on in the end, but he never really gets done well by The Force Awakens. So this new movie starts immediately. He gets a huge scene where I'm like, okay, whatever. Here we go. By the end of that movie, I pretty much didn't like Finn, didn't like Poe, and Rey I was like okay with. And Kylo, definitely, I understood a lot. He got a lot more shine in terms of attention. But, like, the whole new cast, which really only has one other film to exist, they'll be done after the next movie, I pretty much don't care for anymore. And that's damage. That's damage control.
Wait. There's another thing you have to walk away from this film with. Directly ties into what you said, which was there was a recurring theme. It was almost native advertising. This is just the beginning. So I don't know if you guys have heard this, but Rian Johnson has signed on to do 3 more films after episode 9.
But they're not related to Skywalker trilogy.
It's not going to end with Episode 9. I don't see how it does. I don't see how this story does without it being complete garbage. Like, they kept referring to it as the beginning. My prediction, because we don't know, is that the next movie isn't where Kylo meets his end and the universe is restored. It's the next 10, whatever it is they choose to do. There's going to be a TV series.
I don't think so.
It's going to be a long tail on this thing. The First Order's, they're not doing a 3-movie and then we're done original trilogy.
Well, but you say that, but I mean,
movie 2. It felt like movie 1.
There's such a thing, but there's such a thing as a story arc, right? And it's like, usually the trilogy theme is that it's an arc that resolves. It doesn't mean the universe ends and stories don't continue.
This is Disney, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a thing, and they're not going to fuck it up with Star Wars.
Most of their things resolve.
And even they have these big arcs that it resolves.
No, I know, but they're like 50 movies deep. They're 50 movies deep, and you're cracked if you think it's over with the next film.
I would bet you $5,000 today, this is how certain I am, that the Rey, Kylo, Poe Dameron, Finn story is over after Episode 9. They might get their own solo movies every once in a while.
I'll take you on that bet. That's an easy $5,000 in my pocket.
But see, I think that you're
not so easy.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding?
No.
How many Marvel movies are there?
Bo, I don't think you're understanding how you can make Star Wars movies without using the same characters.
They're going to be there longer because people grow attached. How many movies has Iron Man done?
But Bo, that point right there is destroyed because of what we're talking about. You're like, people are going to like these characters. They're just killing off the characters we already like. Well, they don't care about that.
They're killing off the old characters, none of the new ones.
It doesn't matter. These are going to be the new old characters. If you think they're going to keep them around for 30 years, you're wrong.
You guys are like, this is like talking about movies from 30 years ago. It's not how movies are done. It's not trilogies anymore.
But the point being,
I know how movies are done,
but it's not trilogies anymore. Rey is not story not over with the next film.
See, they could definitely do another in 10 years or whatever. Do a 10 years forward trilogy. That's possible. Okay. But the next Rian Johnson trilogy that you're talking about, he has gone on the record to say it is going to be not involved in any way with the Skywalker saga.
I know that too. That doesn't mean his movies are the only ones, right? Like there's going to be more after this. Rey has got to be continuing on. She has no story yet. There's literally nothing.
Well, they
found her in a junkyard. She swung a lightsaber. Mm-hmm. She talked to Luke Skywalker. Like, there's nothing, and they're not making the same mistake. Okay, look,
that can help bring it back to we're getting off on where this thing's going, and let's bring it back to maybe this movie a little bit. And at some point, I'm like Rey a little bit, where it's kind of like at one point I was kind of like, what? Why is she? What's her motivation or what's she doing? It's really unclear, and usually with the main character,
I thought it was very clear. She wants to know who her parents are.
Well, they're nobody.
Now she's I know, but that was her motivation, and then her motivation was controlling this power that awakened with her in the last one that's scaring her. Her motivation was she was one of the characters that was most clearly defined in terms of motivation.
Right. So but the point. So you talked about the first movie. Her motivation was finding her parents, and again, back to like how you write a screenplay. It's like your main character has to have a motivation, something they're trying to achieve that you understand, that a viewer understands. And it's like this movie basically just said, "Oh yeah, that thing, it's nothing."
She wasn't out to find her parents.
She was
waiting on the planet for her parents. She wanted to know. Like,
so the point,
stuff we're doing is keeping me from waiting for my parents.
So Rian Johnson, I'm going to try to say it right so the Bo can stop having to fit every time I say it the way I thought it was pronounced.
If he's listening, he's not going to take kindly to our words if you don't get his name right.
So the point is so he was like, oh, I don't care about the parents thing, it's done. I'm quashing it, they're nobody. I mean, some people put forward like, oh, he could be lying, it's Kylo Ren, he's dark, he's evil. He could be just telling her a big lie.
And bear in mind, that movie spent a lot of the time on the parents thing. Like, she talked about it. She went into that, dark side temple in much the same way as Luke had that episode in Dagobah with the mirrored versions of herself.
Yeah, I don't believe that story.
there was a lot of time. It was only in at the end of the throne room scene that they had a resolution, and either that resolution is that her parents are nobodies, which is fine and shows that she's been repressing this and is emotional growth for her as a character, or he's lying in ways to manipulate her to the dark side, which is also a very, it gives us something to think about between movies.
Yeah. Or they repeat episode 1 and she's immaculately concepted, that they could also just toss that in. Like she's just born into the universe.
Well, okay.
Anakin
So
style.
say, okay. So another thing that I was thinking about was that, like, the first movie, it's like they set up, when you read the credits, okay, in Force Awakens, it starts with like Luke Skywalker has vanished, and keep in mind, it's not like he hasn't been isolated for 30 years. It's not been that long.
No, because he had the Jedi Academy, and like
Kylo
60?
Ren was already in an older, so maybe
like,
let's assume it's 5 years or something like that. It's not that long he's been gone, and it's not clear why he's gone. So these are like mysteries, and it's a big goal everyone has. Stop, Bo. I can see you want to cut me off. Just hear me out a little.
You guys take a long time and say.
I'm
so
looking
many
at
words.
you. I'm trying to get a point out, and then I would like to hear what you guys respond to. So it's stated as his goal. They're trying to find the whole first movie is about trying to find Luke Skywalker.
No.
He's important. It's made very clear. They're like, we need him. This thing has grown back. We need this guy. He's the only Jedi. It's important. We don't know why he's on this island. Then in this movie, it's like, and at the end of the first movie, we still don't know why he's there. They exchange this look, and some people have pointed again. I mean, I read this thing about the whole Rian Johnson giving FUs to J.J. Abrams with the throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder, because it's like they say if you watch that last scene and Luke Skywalker takes the lightsaber from her, there's like these heavy. There's some heavy exchanges of just glances and facial expressions, and then he's just like, oh yeah, just throw it over your shoulder, and he's taken it in a completely different direction, and again, that's maybe okay or whatever, but what I want to come back to is again just so why did he go away? And we learn in this movie that's because he just is giving up. He's closed himself off from the Force. He's done with everything. He's gone there to die. That's what we get told. Whereas in the first movie, you're like, and you're like, we don't know why. He's found this. They imply that it's the place where the Jedi first started. So who knows what he's been after? This is all up in the air at the end of the first one. And now we've learned that he just went there to kind of like while away the years until he died.
I'm pretty sure you knew it. I knew it after the first one.
I knew that he was kind of broken spirited, so he was looking for this maybe answers at this place where the Jedi started.
I watched Force Awakens before seeing it.
And me too.
And there isn't like definitely the whole Knights of Ren and Kylo overthrowing seemed like it would be a low point, and going into hiding sort of makes sense. But you can read into it that he didn't go to mope and become a recluse. He could have. Yeah. The Jedis all the time, like especially in the Clone Wars, it happens a lot. They go to ancient Jedi planets to find answers that they can't solve.
Yeah, to find answers or learn new things about the Force. Like, so I would say in this movie, this is my last bit, and I was like, okay, so this movie starts. It's like she's there now. It's like what her new goal for this movie, at least in theory, in my mind, was like, okay, like her goal now is to either learn the ways of the Force from Luke Skywalker or convince him to come back and help the rebellion. Now you could argue that she did do that. He did make a illusion that bought them 10 minutes.
It was the shittiest help he could. He gave like the worst amount of help he possibly could.
It's just so disappointing. But the thing is, it's like she largely fails at it, and that she basically abandons him. She's like, okay, I'm taking these books and I'm flying away because you're done, Luke Skywalker. And all he does is like project this image and then kill himself so that Kylo Ren gets what he wants without having to exert any actual effort to do it. Yeah. It just seems like such a waste. Where I'm like, they didn't. No, so
what's the question?
These are my thoughts. It's not a direct question. It's just like
it sounded like
a question.
It sounded like it was a question, but then I got to episode 8 of the thing you were saying, and then you were there just talking.
So
You're like, just give me a second here. I'm getting to the question.
My question is kind of like, do you feel like they set something up and then didn't deliver? And that's how I feel a little bit, like that they were like, oh, this thing's gonna happen with Luke Skywalker, and then they're like, oh, no, it's just nothing.
Yeah,
and I felt like there was a whole bunch of those in this movie. Was like, you thought this, but it's nothing, and that happened like 3 times.
I'll keep my answer concise so Croft can weigh in, because I think I already said that yes, Luke Skywalker was disappointing to me. There was a setup there, I didn't get it. The Snoke thing, I hated at first, but I actually like it. Because I like that he's kind of insignificant in a way to the story. There's something kind of awesome about the Snoke thing that I was upset about at first, but when I thought about it, made sense, as well as the parents thing. I'm kind of okay with that because that leaves that question open. The Luke thing, though, travesty. We waited years. I just want Luke to wield a lightsaber and be awesome and get killed in the way that Jedis do. Okay.
And not with like a projection with Grecian formula in his beard.
He's like, hey, all right, come on. And he does the shoulder thing. No. He's like, your fucking lasers can't defeat a Jedi Master. And then he's like, kidding, not here. And then all they needed was Rick Astley to show up and be like, never going to give you up, never going to hold you down. And Kylo's like, no, I've been read wrong. Anyways,
you
go
guys
Crofton.
Are the worst. Like, you're just absolute fanboying, like ragers on Luke Skywalker.
I'm pissed about that. I am like 10 on 10 pissed about Luke. Luke was.
I will tell you right now. I think that I have one beef with the Luke Skywalker, and I'm going to talk about it later because I need to go on his defense. I thought, if they're going the angle that they're going, which to me, I don't understand, where everybody's like, after The Force Awakens, like, oh, we didn't know why he was on this island. Yes, we did. He was training Kylo Ren. Kylo killed all his pupils. They had a flashback to it in The Force Awakens. Luke's really upset. He isolated. Yeah, they didn't spell it out in minute detail, but like we knew he was on exile to this island or whatever. And
to become more awesome, clearly.
They've set that the character. They had to do something with him. They've already laid all these cards in The Force Awakens. I was totally prepared for all of that stuff. Mark Hamill delivered the best performance that he has delivered as Luke Skywalker.
Agree. Agree.
Okay, I'm not done though.
I know you're not done. There's only been 10 minutes.
He was amazing as Luke Skywalker, and really brought like emotional poise to the role. And then when he pulled at the end, and so I told both of you guys, I think last time, that the way Luke Skywalker was gonna as soon as this trilogy was announced, he was going to have an Obi-Wan Kenobi moment where he's going to be standing there. Somebody's going to swing a sword. His robe was going to fall to the ground, and then his Force Ghost was going to be with him. And this movie was a series of defying expectations all over the place, from the throwing the lightsaber at the beginning to everything in between. Snoke, it was defying expectations left and right. So for me, that scene with Luke, because you don't know that he's an illusion until the end. Yes, he has different facial hair. He's made himself look exactly like Kylo Ren.
Oh yeah, he got a haircut, by the way.
Only his illusion. He made himself
but they didn't know he was an illusion. Like, if I was Leia, I'd be like, that fucking Luke stopped for a haircut before coming to planet to come save him.
This is how I knew I was thinking too much of the movie, and I told Jesse this. I was thinking about his haircut and how he stopped for a haircut on the way to this, and that drove me nuts. So the fact that he was an illusion and did not stop for a haircut was actually a huge plus. But like so that whole scene, again, a visual masterpiece with the salt and the blood planet crate and all the AT-ATs. They're all shooting down, and he's still there, and he walks out, and you're like, bitch, please. And I'm thinking to myself, like, when I find out that he's played Kylo in the end, I just thought that was super awesome. I was like, man, Luke's the man. And then it goes back to him, and he's astral projected himself to do this thing.
So wait.
And I thought it was super awesome.
Yeah.
And then he dies looking at the two suns, that not the same as Tatooine, but an echo back to that, coupled with scenes like where he meets R2 on the Falcon, where he's in the cockpit of the Falcon. Just wait.
You're gonna move on. Don't move on from this point. That's all.
no, I'm sort of in defense of the portrayal of Luke here, and so like. So he's there with R2D2. He's seeing old clips from the past. There's lots of plays. Bo used the example earlier of the wink to 3PO. He's got a lot of like little elements. Yes, I read tons of articles where people are like, "Oh, it'd be super awesome if Luke came in and just pulled the Star Destroyer down from the sky and killed a zillion dudes." And that's the Luke Skywalker we want.
It should have been something along those lines. Yeah. But I need to stop you. I need to stop you because
No, you don't need to stop me. Let me finish my thought.
Because you're going to move on from that point of the conversation.
I'm not. I'm talking in defense of Luke here. You guys have gone
on forever. But you brought up something interesting, and it deserves a stop.
Okay, fine. What is it that you want to stop my flow of conversation for?
It's not conversation. It's a flow of monologue. Okay, first of all. Second of all, that point where they're shooting a whole bunch of AT-AT cannons at Luke, and it's like, oh, it's awesome. But he was really a force projection this whole time, means that Kylo believed, and Kylo's no stupido about the Force, believed it was possible for an actual person to be able to withstand that amount. Like, he didn't look at that and go, even a guy good with the Jedi Force could not withstand that amount of blaster fire. He's like, oh man, that shit's fucking possible. I know it is. So Luke could have still done that in person anyways. Like, so
no, but why would he? Why would he endanger?
Because he's gonna die anyway.
But there's for me, there was something more epic about it.
I wanted to see him, be a man.
Yeah, there's something more epic about him being like sort of, because the whole point was Luke died at peace. He died in a moment where he's looking at the sky. He got to say his goodbyes, but then he also got to die in a peaceful place by himself. And to me, that is knowing that Luke was going to die from the onset. That was the best possible death for Luke, for me, for him as a character. Dying in the rager of battle is what everybody seems to have wanted to see.
Helping his friends and being actual Luke Skywalker.
He did help his friends.
He didn't help them.
No, he did. He helped them as much as he would have if he was actually there.
He helped them for 2 seconds. You're right.
That's what he needed to do.
But he needed to do so much. He knew Leia was at war that whole time. He knew that people were hurting the whole time he was on the island.
Okay, let me get in here a little bit because this scene is pretty prominent. I think it's okay to spend a bit of time on it. I'm like kind of exactly in between you guys with this scene in that like there's part of me that is I literally flip-flop my head when I think about it, because I do think it's awesome. I think it's awesome that he can use the Force, project himself across the galaxy. No one thought that was possible. He's like super. I like that he's like, he's become this Force wielder in this different way. It's not just lightsaber. I think that was really cool. And then the other part of me is like, but it's also kind of like stupid. He's not there. He's not. So like I keep flip flopping. And the reason why I didn't like the whole he wasn't really there and that it cost him his life is because this big stated goal of the First Order and these people is to have him be dead. That's what they want so much. And it's like, mission accomplished. He's dead. And then
he's
when
not dead. He's one with the Force.
Whatever.
It's a huge difference.
It can show up apparently. Yeah, but arguably that would have happened anyways. No matter what, happened to Yoda just being old in his bed.
I do not believe that the astral projection is what caused him to immediately die. He chose to open himself to the Force and become one with the Force. Yeah. There was a giant monologue in this film about the Force and what it is on a spiritual level, and not about how it's owned by so-and-so or so-and-so, right? And so in the end, he closed himself off to the Force. That was a big plot point. He opened himself up and decided to become one with the Force.
Sure. But I guess a little bit part of what I thought was sort of, again, lame about it. And again, I'm half right with you where I'm like, it's also awesome. It really is these two things for me where I'm like jittering between the two. Because it's also like when he's telling Kylo Ren, he's like, I will not be the last Jedi. I wanted him to have like a little in brackets be like, I didn't help her at all and was kind of a dickhead and I'm going to give her zero help. Hopefully those book user manuals will be pretty good.
No, he doesn't know she has them.
He's like, I had Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, but I'm sure she'll figure it out with the manuals. Like, okay, so I was like, okay. He didn't put that bracket in, but that's what happened. And he's like, and the rebellion is reborn today. It's like, again in bracket, he's like, I realized that like 6 hours ago we had a fleet, and it got all destroyed today, but now it's born again today. Also, because 30 people got away in a Millennium Falcon, it's like it also ended today, Luke Skywalker. It's like he's like, it's all happy about it being reborn, and I'm like, if you had acted, I'm just like, and this is the stuff that's a little bit infuriating in terms of plot, which is the sense that like something. He's like, it's this meaningful speech he has, the rebellion's reborn, and you start thinking about the plot. I'm like, yeah, but it just exploded at the start of the movie. They blew up the base. It just ended. He's like, so I'm like, this is weak. It's very weak to have been like, now it's his hope at the end of the movie. And so
I agree 100% with that. So I agree 100% but that with the plotting, but not necessarily the presentation of Luke Skywalker.
Well, the presentation of Luke Skywalker I also thought was great. I wholly echo. The performance was awesome. I liked his curmudgeonliness quite a lot. I just wanted to see more action, and I thought that, and I don't mean like lightsaber crazy battles, I mean like character action, him deciding that basic thing about Luke Skywalker, that like when his friends are in need, he will act, he will do something. And I mean, he did sort of do that, and this is why my head is like, but not really. He couldn't get off the rock. We saw there was an X-wing in the water. Maybe he got in it and went someplace, but no, it's all rusted out.
Yeah, it's true. That was some foreshadowing that went nowhere. Ultimately, was that supposed to be a misdirect? Like, it was really
no, it was just how we got there. It was like
on his good old X-wing.
This is why. Because of the weakness of what this delivered plot-wise is what I think helps make it so unsatisfying. The Luke himself and doing this thing is cool, but what it was done for was so minor in terms of, and also after the fact. It was like, wait till everything's destroyed, and then sacrifice yourself in this moment of heroic glory to save 30 people instead of the whole fleet. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's, I think, what's unsatisfying about it, plot-wise. Other things that I saw. Okay, if you want to.
Well, I have a question for you guys. It's so if you're unsatisfied, because this movie took a lot of risks. Like, I think it went in a lot of it did a lot of self-reflection into sort of Star Wars stuff, and it kind of took some plots, because they have all the same pieces here from the original trilogy, and they sort of rehashed or circumvented or spun around the same plots that we've seen before a bunch. So would you have preferred, because there were a lot of elements that were like pretty much cut and paste off Empire Strikes Back from the beginning, the attack on the base to all these things. Would you have preferred it be a cut and paste of Empire Strikes Back? More, she goes to see Luke, like Luke went to see Dagobah, he trains her, she lifts the rock or whatever, like it goes through a lot of the similar motions, and then at the end, there's a Cloud City equivalent where they meet, Kylo Ren, she runs off and Luke is like, no, stay, complete your training and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
If it had been a more cut and paste of Empire Strike Back, would you be more satisfied, or are you more satisfied with this?
No, like, see, that's a good question, and say, would I be more satisfied with that? Or this? Because I would have been wholly dissatisfied if it was exactly like Empire Strikes Back. I mean, for the record, I do think it was, in the sense that it was that typical dark, it's the middle part of a movie. Everything that they tried to do mostly went wrong. I'm all for that in terms of plot. When you're trying to, like, you put your characters in this position, shit goes wrong again and again and again. That's the right thing to do in this portion of the movie. And a lot of the risks that they did take, I thought were really good. The killing of Snoke, I thought was actually a great thing to do, because I thought it showed, especially, it gave Kylo Ren this new sort of, it was like, so it's like he's the new Darth Vader. It's like Snoke's the new Emperor. You have Rey, she's the new Luke. She's like, I'm going to go turn him to the light side. And at the end of the Empire, Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader's redeemed. He kills the Emperor, and he realizes his evil ways. In this one, I loved that they went the other way, where he's like, no, I killed the Emperor because I'm the shit, and now I take power. I'm like, okay, this is good stuff to go in a different direction, where they're saying, no, he's not going to be turned to the light side. He's going to consolidate his own power because the dark side of the force is surging him. Great decision. So some of those things I thought were really good. I'm not fully crashing on this movie. So that I thought was all good, and I appreciated that Luke was like, it's not going to go the way you think it will, because he's seen into Kylo Ren. He knows how deep it goes. So I appreciated that kind of stuff. It's mostly the Luke Skywalker stuff that's unsatisfying, and it's not all that I just wanted to see him kick some ass. Because arguably he did a little bit. I just wanted to see him as a character used well, in the same way that Han Solo was used well in The Force Awakens. He was Han Solo. He was doing his thing. He was trying hard. Shit was bad before. He was here. He was his character, and I was okay with Luke being downtrodden, but I was hoping part of it was going to be Rey getting him back to himself, to be like, yes, my faith in my friends
I have a concise thing to add on, and maybe you'll agree, but I just want to throw it out there, is I expected more of a Sir Alec Guinness kind of vibe, like a New Hope vibe, right? Uncle Ben, he comes to help, guides Luke. Like, that's what I expected from Luke, ultimately. I think if you're going to say, dude, I want something new, or did I want something cut and paste, I would have leaned on the cut and paste, to be honest, of A New Hope. And give me Uncle Ben, except it's Luke. Because that's his first father figure. Yeah. I don't know.
That was a better parallel, I think. More like A New Hope, I agree. And it's not even to cut and paste that. I wouldn't have gone that route, because I think that's weak, too. Because you can do it in a new way, because it's like New Hope. It's, again, the classic hero's quest, and the reason these things are revisited is because they're thousands of years old as a storyline. And it's like, Obi-Wan, follow me on some damned idealistic crusade, and him being like, no, I don't want to go. The old person trying to rouse the hero into action. And this one's the opposite. It's like she comes in and is like, can you help me there, Luke? And he's like, no, go away. And then she just leaves, and it's like, so it's like, it's a trope that's not satisfying, in the sense that it's supposed to be the old generation hopefully imparting something to a new generation, so that they have the strength to then go and do something new. And again, and this is why it's so difficult, because he kind of still does that, because of the whole, like, he does show up.
She doesn't I'm
so torn on that thing.
But the way you're explaining it is not how it happened. She doesn't just show up and then he's like, get lost, and she leaves.
Well, he does say that a bunch. Why don't you leave?
Oh my God, his lessons suck so hard. Here's the Force. Reach out with your feelings. It's like, Jedi suck. That's lesson 1.
Yeah, but like, that whole speech was really, really interesting about, like, how the ownership of the Force, of what the Force actually is.
That's why I called Mike today at the top of the show the sequel trilogy, because honestly, new Luke Skywalker reminded me the most of Mike. Like, just like, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the people. And I'm like, I don't want to watch Mike the Jedi. I want to watch Luke the Jedi.
I even look like him right now with the beard.
Yeah,
it was interesting. I agree, but
yeah, I just found that he did, like, he there was a similar amount of him training or informing Rey as there was of Yoda informing Luke or anybody. But it was the opposite
direction. He was fighting against her to, like, not learn stuff, and in the end, it was. And again, I thought this was a bit weak too. That it's like, it's Yoda who shows up. Now I was looking at the nostalgia thing of, like, Yoda. I was like, oh look, it's Yoda, and they use the puppet instead of, like, the crappy CGI, because Luke Skywalker is about to go. It's like he's supposed to be old and wise now, and it's like, you hope after all these years he for sure has learned some things, but they make him like, oh no, he still hasn't learned anything, and Yoda's like, young Skywalker, you're still an idiot after all this time, and here I am, I have to do a Force.
But that was this, and that was the same thing with Ben Kenobi. Like, he lied to Luke essentially, and, like, had to admit failure. It's all about failure.
But he continually, yes, and that, I thought that was okay that he thought that, but it's still like, Luke couldn't come to that conclusion on his own. He needed Yoda to come out of the Force and show him that, tell him directly, like, look, it's okay, go ahead, and it's like, and you'd think Luke Skywalker would have known that already, because he had his share of failures already and still kept doing things because his faith in his friends was his big thing.
Hang on.
And
he could have. I'm sure this isn't the only consultation of a force projection that must have happened, because my first reaction to Yoda was, why isn't his dick father Anakin the one showing up? Why is it fucking Yoda? He turned Anakin. Anakin's a Force ghost, and Anakin's like, "Fuck my son, right. Yoda, you go talk to him." I was like, "What is wrong with this movie?"
Right. I mean, I didn't even think of that, but that's a super good point because the whole thing was a redemption of Darth Vader. In theory, he's Anakin Skywalker, realizes evil ways,
and he's the expert on turning to the dark side, not freaking Yoda or Obi-Wan. Like. Oh, there's so much about this movie. And kind of what
we're talking about here is part of the problem with all of this. And back to Crofton's
it's too deep level nerd.
It is, and that's the problem with this stuff. And it's again coming back to like the magic. I really think this is true of so many of these stories. Like when you first see, the first time you ever saw A New Hope, you're like, "What is this? I don't know what it is." It's new, and it intrigues you, and there's all this stuff you don't know, and it inspires you, and you want to see more and more and more. And probably saw enough, and there was enough there to keep the magic alive. But they're like, here's a little more, here's a little more, here's a little more, and now we all know so much that we're all experts on Star Wars. Everyone who watches it, everyone's got your own ideas, and this is part of the problem with it, because we can all sit here and pull apart the minutia of these things and be unsatisfied or agree with this decision or not agree with that decision. And that's what's the trouble with doing these things. And Crofton, was you who always like, they should have never made them. And I'm coming back more to your way of thinking on this.
The two bones of contention strike us, pushing the controversy a little bit about this, have been two deep nerd things. One is Princess Leia and going out into space. People had a really hard time with that scene.
Really?
And
I kind of like that scene.
Yeah, there's a ton of people that were just like, "Well, we've never seen this Force thing before," and then all.
Yeah, but at the end of Empire Return of the Jedi, he's like, "I'll teach you."
She's shown no, Force powers or abilities. Luke's been away. Like how? Anyway, bottom line is. People had tremendous issues, and then they had tremendous issues with this tracking through light speed thing, which was hilarious to me for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
But the number one is that it's just so deep level nerd. They're like, well, that was never possible before. So, but
then my answer to that is like in The Force Awakens, it's like as soon as the Millennium Falcon goes anywhere, Han Solo's like, hey, my tracking device, no, I know exactly where it is. And he shows up. So it's like in the very preceding movie, it's like if Han Solo made a tracking device that could make him find the Millennium Falcon anywhere, you think the Empire couldn't have figured it out too?
And also it's just like stuff like the first episode 4, the first thing is like, we're caught in a tractor beam. Oh no, what are we going to do? So the first Death Star, this is now years old, had a tractor beam that could pull in ships. And all of a sudden these giant Star Destroyer / dreadnoughts are like, oh no, they're flying away real fast. Do you think we should activate the tractor beam? Oh, I didn't go for that option. Was that an option? I could have got a tractor beam? Yeah, you totally could have. They've existed. They've been compacted for years. Oh, I didn't get the track. I guess we're just gonna have to drive for an entire movie after them. It's just like you have to forget about all these things. Like you just have to be like, okay, these are the this is how it's being presented to you. Yeah. Just roll with it. And I had no problem. I have no problems with that. And I still feel that was the part I was successfully able to detach myself from. What I wasn't was when there were giant plots and scenes that went nowhere. For me, it was just. It's I get that it might be refreshing that the heroes don't win, that they go somewhere and they go on this epic adventure and it leads to them infiltrating a Death Star for the zillionth time, but this time they actually get caught. Like I get that that's refreshing or new, but like it's not satisfying. It's not interesting.
Yeah. And it's not even that was like. Even it's like when it's like, oh, let him kill Phasma because that's his arch nemesis. It all feels so strained, and even the whole and just stuff like
you'll always be scum.
Yeah.
Rebel scum, bitch.
I know, it's so late. And also when someone does something stupid, and this is almost like a movie trope thing in which people will get away from, they're like, shoot them, thousands of stormtroopers. Wait, no, it's too good for them. Let's give an elaborate way of killing them that buys them slightly more time so that something can happen. Like, that is like, you're like, okay. As soon as that happened, I'm like, groan, because it's dumb. Like, let's face it, you want to kill someone, kill him. Every time I watch a James Bond movie and someone's like, oh, the laser beam and the sharks, James Bond, it's like, just shoot him now. If you like, stop being dumb about these things, And it's like, but they can't. They always have to be dumb, and it's like a tell to the audience where it's like, we don't know really what we're doing. We're just making you watch stuff here, and that's how that whole side scene felt to me. They're like, here's a bunch of stuff for you to watch now. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it doesn't contribute to the story in any way or character development. But just watch it for a while.
This isn't a criticism of this movie in particular, but I would take just a Jedi-centered movie. Like, forget the spaceship battles, and have weird aliens and shit in it, but focus it on just Jedi shit. I don't need the other people element, right? Like the Finns and the Poe Damerons. I would take just Rey, Snoke, Kylo, Luke, Leia, she's a Force user.
But see, that brings me back to Bo's been sending us memes all day, and one of them is like a choose your own adventure Star Wars ending because nobody's satisfied with anything. Bo's like, I would just take this, take away this, put this.
It's what I want. I'm allowed to want things. Like,
no, you are allowed to want things, but this is the whole problem of where we're at with Star Wars. I will be honest, like this movie, like what I liked a lot of it, and I think it's well crafted in many regards, in many ways. Yeah. And I want to see it again. But when I came out of it, my first feeling was like, I'm not a kid anymore, and that's a bummer of a feeling to have. And I'll be honest, when I go, this movie was preceded by the trailer for the Infinity War Avengers movie, and I looked at that movie and I was like, I'm going to enjoy that movie, and I'm not going to feel like I feel now, and I don't know why that is necessarily. Maybe because it's newer, maybe because it's all, like in its prime. It's not churning away on nostalgia. Maybe because even though it's tropey, it's not exactly the same family of characters encounter the exact same problems over and over again. I don't know what it is, but I just feel like I'll still be there to see Star Wars, but they're getting close to. I've lost the furor after this movie of like having to be like when Episode 9 comes out. I know I'll get caught up in the hype as I want to do, but I like this time for Episode 7. I was in day one. For The Force Awakens, I was in day one, even maybe like a special screening. I was in very early. For episode 8, I was in like over a week later. It's been in theaters for close to 2 weeks or something, and I can just see this escalating. Like the Han Solo movie is going to come out in May. I don't see myself I'm going to see it. It's just. But the desire diminishes each time, and I definitely felt that this time.
Well, that whole that meme with the choose your own adventure is funny, and it's so true, and I think it's a bit tough when you see I saw an interview with Rian Johnson being he's like, I'm a Star Wars fan, and I heard J.J. Abrams say the same thing, and that's a bit the problem because every again what we're getting to here, which is this is a problem, we all have our own ideas, because it's if I had been at the helm of this thing, I'm I would have done some different things. And I think I would have taken risks. That obviously was never going to happen in a million years. But I would have done a few different things. I think I would have taken risks too. But then you start thinking, so who's Rian Johnson? It's one thing when it was everyone had to hate on for the prequels. And I always thought this in the back of my head of because if I was George Lucas didn't give a fuck. He made Star Wars. It's his. He invented it. It's he's oh, you liked it? Yeah, it came out of my brain. This is what I'm gonna do. You don't like it? F off. And it's sort of true. It's his creative property. It's his creative license. I give him full credit. He can do whatever he wants. He wrote the damn thing. But all of this now, J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, it's fan fiction. It's written by fans after the fact. And I guess that's the problem. So they're fans, great. Well, I'm a fan too. I have my ideas. So does everyone else. And that's why no one can be pleased. If it was George Lucas, you can be like, you could disagree with him and be like, it's his story. He does what he wants. He wrote it. But now it's fans writing it, and you're always going to be peeved, or I am, at what other fans thought about a certain character. Look, even when you think about the original ones, like I love Luke Skywalker. Crofton for sure, more a Han Solo dude. So it's like you have different feelings and emotional attachments to these characters based on just whatever you felt or however you respond to them. We're fans. So are these new filmmakers, and I feel like that's always going to be kind of a problem. And I mean, once they get away from the Skywalker saga stuff, it might be better. But I feel like at that point, unfortunately for me, is that I think we're just back into CGI vomit, which is what basically Hollywood is now. And without the kind of like anchoring in my nostalgia of these stories and these characters, I might be off Star Wars. And in the same way that I wasn't into, I never read the novels of Star Wars. I never got into Clone Wars. I was interested in these characters and through lines. And if all I'm going to get is like CGI vomit and new characters in the next movies, I'm like, whatever. I don't think I care that much anymore. And that makes me a bit sad too. And, it's just about like, when I keep coming back to this, like, should they have just left well enough alone? But the answer, and getting out of the movie and coming back to reality is like, they could not. No one was ever going to leave this alone. They can't not make Star Wars movies because they want the money so bad. And it's just there to be taken. And we all know that, right? Any Star Wars movie they're going to make, it's just cash. They can't not do it. They will always do it. And it will annoy people like us. And other people who don't have the same attachments will love it because it's just blockbuster fodder, right?
Yeah. I mean, they got real cynical there. I'm not going to lie.
Well,
but I don't disagree. It stopped becoming a review of The Last Jedi and more like our childhood. It's like we're their prison cellmate and they're raping us because they want money, and it's like, oh, I feel bad now. But maybe you're not wrong. I don't know.
And to a point,
yourself, that is what it's about.
Because Rian Johnson got some criticism for that last scene with the child, because the child has essentially an action figure, and like the idea was like, oh, it's like just merchandising right up front, being like, oh. But his view of things is like, look, when I grew up as a kid, I had all my action figures and I played, and this is how I captured my imagination and had the stories, lived on beyond the film for me. And there is some, we talked about merchandising on the show, and there is some element of truth to that, how you see it or how you don't. Star Wars was the first series to film really to merchandise the way that it has. True, like these new Star Wars movies are leading to a bazillion pieces of merchandise and a ton of money.
There was a Kylo Ren sticker on the bananas I bought at the grocery store, and I saw it. I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? It's a banana!" Like, that's been licensed by Del Monte's. Like, we need to get in on this Star Wars action. People aren't buying bananas anymore. They need force powers.
Well, yeah, it's like, eat these bananas and you'll grow up to be a dick just like nephew Kylo.
Yeah, why was it Kylo Ren?
What was so weird was when you peeled the banana, it just made the lightsaber sound when you turned it on. Like, it was just sort of bizarre. But
actually, I just peeled it and it was rotten inside, ruining my expectations.
They weren't bananas. They were Rihanna's.
But your whole, like, they would never leave it alone. They would never leave it alone. I would say, like, they were never going to leave Star Wars alone. That's for sure. But there was a good chance we were getting very close to them leaving the original cast.
Why was that? Alone. Because it was in George Lucas's hands. And someone was like, here's a $4 billion. They're like, look, George Lucas, we can't give you any more money. There's no, and he's like, all right, I guess I'll take it. And now it's unleashed, and it was like the only protection we had against this kind of thing happening. And look, a lot of it's really good. I enjoyed this movie, even though I'm crapping on it a lot. I did enjoy it. It was good, and so was Force Awakens, and so will the next one. Will be entertaining too, for sure. But like the only protection we had about that was that it was George Lucas's thing. He had it, he controlled it, and then he sold it, and now it's out there, and now it's all the fans are gonna.
And what's
and
amazing is that he was able to make the prequels and still sell it for that much. Because I like the prequels, but it's very trendy.
Well, they kind of suck.
Like, the prequels.
But again, they're his. If he wants to ruin them, he can. If you don't like it, stop watching. Right?
I mean, it just goes to show you the power of the original.
Ruins it, if Rian Johnson ruins it, he's just like me. He's some fan. He's probably the same age as me. I'm like, I don't respect him because he made Looper? Yeah, it's a pretty good movie, but whatever. Like, he's in the right place in the right time. It's just like if any Star Wars fan who happens to get in with that studio, now they're going to be able to write Star Wars. Great. Yeah. That's awesome for them.
I think we should get to verdicts. We're on an hour and a half here, boys.
I forgot we're even doing ones.
I know the show's just getting warmed up now. It's good.
Rian Johnson's 44.
Yeah. So, but before
I like to see him playing with his Star Wars figures when he's a kid. He's like Luke Skywalker. He just lies him down in the corner. He's like, he's tired and weak.
Before we do, hang on. I know it's fun to bash Rian Johnson. You got me saying Rian Johnson. I want to talk about like just things we liked because we spent a lot of this movie focusing on our disappointment, and
you guys have for sure.
Yeah.
You have to.
No, I'm the only one that's said anything
been defending.
About this movie.
We've been tainting him with our energy, really.
I'm the one that talked about performances.
No, we know.
Visual look of the film, how they did well by Luke Skywalker. You guys have only said negative shit.
Yeah.
I said killing Snoke was brilliant, and it is.
So hang on. I want to talk if we have any parts you thought were really awesome or your favorite parts. Pick like one or two, unless you have a lot and feel really passionate about. But here's my favorite. I've got two. All right. One was I thought Leia was awesome. I loved her character. She was present in this one way more than the other one. Even though she didn't have a lot of agency, she was very important. I love that they gave her the spacewalk. A lot of people hated the spacewalk. I loved the spacewalk. I loved the racial and cultural diversity, and that she is not just a token woman leader, but a very important person in the story. And she's passed away. I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to get a new actor, but I need to see way more of her in this next movie. Kylo wouldn't shoot on her. Kylo's mom was, I mean, think about the way Kylo is. He's mad at daddy, mad at his uncle. Mommy, mom. Like, he loves his mom. That's something they communicated to us in the story, that he'd have the hardest time with doing something evil towards his mother. That much is clear. She's number one on his I love you list. I'm really interested in that.
So that was your okay.
That was one. I really loved the way they handled Leia and her role in the story. The second one was I forgot. Okay, well I guess I don't get to have it. But the second thing, was Snoke and it was Kylo. Kylo was all like, I didn't love Kylo in Force Awakens. I really was like, I'm on Team Kylo. If I end up hating all the characters, I won't hate Kylo. Like, I'll just be rooting for Kylo in episode 9 because he's actually kind of. This is the one thing the story about the uncle killing or the nephew killing gave me, was that like, oh yeah, I could see that he's been a problematic student. He made his legendary uncle so mad that he woke up and he's holding a lightsaber over his bed. It's like, I'd probably be done with that toxic temple too. So I'm kind of like, I kind of see it from his view a little better, and I liked him a lot. That's it.
So that wasn't a scene, that was just like a
It's
general...
no, just aspects, anything really, but stuff that we didn't really touch on. We did kind of touch on Kylo, but not so much Leia. Leia was amazing in this. I loved it.
I'm going to say something unpopular about Leia because she's deceased. It's not going to go over well. I'm sorry. But like, if we're going to be talking about the movie, I like the role that they gave Carrie Fisher and Leia and stuff like that. But we talk about remembering characters. Han Solo, Harrison Ford, say what you will, he slipped into Han Solo's boots in The Force Awakens perfectly. He felt like exactly he was in tune with that character. I didn't like that they had him return to adolescence where he's going around with his Chewbacca in these shipyards and he's left his wife and all that sort of stuff. I didn't necessarily like that stuff, but the way that he was that character, for me, nailed it. Mark Hamill, best performance ever as Luke Skywalker in this movie. Really emoted well, like dug into all sorts of different emotions.
You're gonna talk shit about Leia's performance, aren't you?
All the torment
I know where you're going with this. You don't need to build it up that much.
Leia, and this is like I'm not sure if it's like because Carrie Fisher has had a lot of Botox and stuff like that.
Outside. That's it. You and me, we're going outside to fight.
But I just felt that, yes, stoic leader. Yeah, she was a stoic leader. That's great. She was cool and calm, and she was very similar to Mon Mothra's character. Many Bothams died to bring us this information from Return of the Jedi, but she didn't have that Princess Leia in either the Force Awakens or this. To me, she wasn't the character that I recalled. And yeah, I know she's been through a lot in her life, and she can't be the spunky princess that's, pulling out the gun and saying, "I'm going to put you out the airlock, flyboy," or whatever, But she didn't feel like she was ever that person. And so for me, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Carrie Fisher gave a fantastic."
So you didn't like her performance? Just say that. We asked you what your favorite things about the movie was, and you gave me there's like a 20-minute monologue leading up to. I didn't like her performance.
Slamming the dead.
No, but that's what's so hard. It's just like she's passed. And so that's why I have to do all this, because people are just going to just jump out of context and be like, "Oh, Crofton is, hating on, a dead woman or whatever." We should all revere her performance for being the greatest Princess Leia. I thought,
you didn't like it. You didn't
whatever.
Like it.
So that was your favorite thing? How shitty
my favorite thing of the entire film was the visual and audio design. Period. And I'm talking about everything from do you remember that scene where Hodo, or whatever her name is, the lady with the blue hair who was introduced in this movie just to die for no reason, sends the cruiser splicing through the Star Destroyers, and it cuts the sound, it shows it from a neat angle, everything goes quiet, on Crate, with the bikes taking off and the sand getting ripped off and red blood and stuff, just looked visually stunning. For me, that was one of the things I liked the most about the movie. And my all-time favorite scene after one watch, I have to say, in the movie, is when Luke is explaining the Force to Rey. I almost had sort of goosebumps and stuff like that. And she's, at first, there's the joke where she puts out her hand and he's like, "You feel that? That's the Force," or whatever. It threw me back to Han Solo's Force Awakens joke where he's like, "That's not how the Force works." But when he's explaining it and how it surrounds and binds and isn't owned by anyone, it's not owned by the Jedi, it's not owned by the Sith. There's a spiritual element to it. It's always been there. And I was just I got a little bit of goosebumps. And then when Rey made all the sort of rocks elevate and she's experiencing everything, I thought just the way that scene represented to me that spiritual element of Star Wars that was there in Episode 4 that Han Solo said in the last movie, it's all true, all of it. And for me, that was that moment that sort of brought all that back. So I really did like that scene.
For me, the favorite scene, I think it's pretty much hands down for me. It's basically when. Okay, well, let me preface this a bit. When Luke Skywalker showed up with his Grecian formula on his beard, and
New Hope, when we found Luke Skywalker.
As soon as I showed up, I'm I wasn't I didn't know that it was some kind of projection, but I was like, something's not right. I thought it was a dream sequence, or I was it was very clear to me that this was not really happening. And so all that stuff, I didn't care for that thing. I was like, it's just a bit too pop culture-y to be in there, I thought. And even the coolness of their slight lightsaber battle, which is really cool. The bit that I thought was the best, and it sticks with me, is this it's the coming back to this close-up on Luke, the real Luke, the haggard old man who's back in the Force, and he is sending himself across the galaxy. I still think that is awesome.
He's Dragon Ball Z-ing there, right? When he's meditating, it's
like
he's meditating so hard the wind is blowing his hair back, and he's like sweating,
awesome.
and he's like,
and then it backs off, and he's levitating in the air.
Yeah.
He is just like this force master. That's a bit the thing where it's like that was the one thing I thought that they gave me about the entire movie that I wanted with Luke Skywalker.
I like that too.
Where he's like, he's there, he is the master of the force right there, and I'm like, I love the scene. The lighting was amazing. He's fully committed. He's doing a selfless act. It's awesome. I was a bit sad that he then just died, because in some ways I'm like, he didn't have to die. Like, he could have just been like, oh god, I'm wrecked, and maybe played some other role, but whatever.
He's not dead. He's one with the Force.
Yeah, whatever. So he'll show up.
He could have like.
Why don't you go to the Dagobah system?
Before becoming one of the Force, he could have like helped move a few boxes and then
Yeah. So in any case, like that scene, that specific scene was for sure my favorite. I also really liked. I just echo Bo. I thought that the Leia coming back from space was kind of awesome, and in the sense that it's like, I was open enough to be like, at the end of Return of the Jedi, where they're like, they imply heavily that Leia is like, there is another, and he's like, it's in you too. Like, Luke Skywalker basically says, I'm going to show you some Force stuff at the end of the last movie. He says it, and you kind of forget about it because they don't talk about it in The Force Awakens, and you're sort of like, oh shit, like I thought this was like, it's blown up, she's dead, that's how you get that character out of the way right away, and then it's like, oh, she comes back to this. I was kind of like, this is kind of awesome, and she sort of looked like this kind of weird sorceress. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, surviving space is no small thing either. Like, I feel like surviving space is like no small thing. It's arguably probably the most badass Force power they've had in any of, like, you can jump and flip around. It's like, it's the vacuum of space. That shit'll implode you. Like, it's good.
Yeah, it was impressed. I thought it was cool, and it maybe opens up a little bit to like, maybe she's gonna help train Rey a little bit. Maybe she knows some stuff about the Force.
Although
the other irony that I'm sure no one is lost to no one, where they're so eager to kill off Han Solo and get rid of Luke Skywalker, but they got Mark Hamill and and Harrison Ford is still walking around, and Carrie Fisher dead, and that's the irony of that is, I'm sure, not lost on anybody.
If any studio house has the tech to do it, it's
they said
the fine folks that brought you Rogue One, and
they said early on that they were not going to do that with her.
Oh, well, that sucks.
Well,
I think the end of the movie left a lot of space for them to, like, the spark of hope has been reunited, has been brought back to the galaxy, and I think they could open the next movie with a scene at a funeral for Leia, as sort of like, it's all in our hands now. She's given us all there is to, like, I feel like that she's not. They got to a point where they can do the official handoff. I did think when they announced this trilogy, I was like, oh, good, I'm going to get to watch all my favorites get killed off. I thought that one of them was going to make it through. And my bets were Leia was going to be the one to make it through. No, Chewbacca is kind of like 3PO and R2.
C-3PO and R2 that make it through.
Just as an aside, and this was the movie that cemented this for me, like, the 3PO and R2 got screwed. They
about time. Come on.
Yeah.
No, but they were like the narrative thread. They were the point of view characters through the original trilogy.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, no, pretty much. Like they were there through it all, and that was kind of an interesting point and an interesting narrative trick. And then they were put into the prequels to a lesser extent, but still very prevalent. Yeah, even like going so far as having Anakin being the one to put together C-3PO or whatever, so he's there from the beginning, and now they're still there. 3PO and R2 are still there, but they're kind of like shelved. Like they don't get anything, and instead this BB-8 droid gets everything. Like literally, he got like a zillion money scenes in one movie.
But don't be peeved about that if you're not peeved about them handing off to a new generation. Because I mean, like, You gotta shelve those droids too. Droids don't last forever.
You gotta let them die. Let all the old stuff die.
Kill it.
You know how you guys were always, you're always fan fictioning about like what you would do. Oh, if I had my way, if I had my way. Well, if I had my way, originally what I would have done is I would have shelved. I would never have gone back to Luke and Leia and all that, but I would have continued with R2, 3PO, and maybe had like some cameos of long living creatures like Chewbacca or whatever, but having them being the connective tissue to a new generation of heroes, that I would have been supportive of. I think it would have been a cool sort of nod and a wink where they could occasionally make references where you'd be like, oh yeah, that's right. This isn't the worst shit they've seen.
I always, as another kind of slight aside that we didn't talk about in this movie, we were so focused on the main characters, but like Chewbacca, I always thought even in the old movies, didn't get enough credit sometimes for shit that he does, and I'm like, he's actually pretty awesome. And in this movie, I'm like, he's a good pilot. That dude can pilot some stuff, and it's always like he's like, oh, he's a co-pilot, but I'm like, it's pretty much his ship now, the Millennium Falcon. I hope they just make that established, like it's Chewbacca's ship, but it won't be. It'll be some human character.
And now we're at this point in the conversation too, where we're just thinking of the smaller things because
let's
Chewbacca
get to it.
Eating the porg. And the porgs.
Oh, the porg. I'm glad we didn't talk about porg.
I was okay with porgs. I like them.
I'm all right with porgs.
Yeah.
They're
just
fun.
like whatever.
But they were like they were
a
funny.
Star Wars thing.
They were funny. Like I hope the porgs are in the next movie because they're infested the Millennium Falcon.
And they were essentially Chewbacca's entire story in this movie. And honestly, I'm glad that they were there for that because Chewbacca would have had a bummer of a story otherwise because his best friend and life partner died, or whatever. They could have had him being mopey the entire movie. Instead, they had him goofing around with porgs. I was okay with it.
I liked that he busted down the door to find Luke Skywalker. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was good.
He's like, hey.
Yeah, that was awesome, actually.
So
verdicts.
Yeah,
I think we do need to move into verdicts, even though like stuff is jumping at my mind too. Like there's a lot of little things in this movie.
It'll never end.
We can't cover all the corners in one show, but we talked about the big stuff. Can we bring in the farm animals? Do I have that technology? Where are they?
Dun, 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 dun. Oh. There's a bunch of little scenes I'm forgetting.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
The big horse race.
They were cute, but Order in the court. It's verdict time. So let's not introduce any new evidence into the conversation at this point. We'll be here all night. This is the longest show on record at 1 hour and 46 minutes.
Oh my God! No one's gonna listen to this.
So all right, I'm gonna.
I think it's a holiday. Jim.
I'm gonna go first, and I'm gonna keep it short and say there was a lot to like about this movie. When I'm watching it, I am entertained and into it. I was extremely disappointed with the Luke. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, being mad at certain things, and then coming back and being like, no, that was okay. Like turning around a lot of the stuff and just being okay with it. But the Luke stuff was more meta than just this film. And it's too important for me to not feel like I was disappointed with it. So for that reason, I'm going to give this movie a bullshit rating of bullshit. Wait, my rating's a good rating of bullshit. So it's an enjoyable film. They fucked up Luke.
So I'm also going to say bullshit. And this is one of those times where you remember Siskel and Ebert, they would have the thumbs up, thumbs down thing, and I realize how there's no cop out to that. Like it's like you've got to be like, okay, am I going thumbs up or am I going thumbs down on this thing? And here we have bullshit, which allows us to cop out on a movie review and say say that I liked a lot of it. There's a lot that I didn't like, or there's a lot that I had problems with. There's a lot that troubled my nostalgia bone. There's a lot, whatever. It's complicated and has clearly elicited a lot of emotions out of people. A lot of emotions, and Bo he applauded the diversity, but there's a lot of racists out there that are having huge issues with the fact that new characters are, Asians, that are black people, or people, are women in positions of power and all this. and that all the enemies for are white people for lack of better
males,
terminology.
Actually,
so white men, yeah. So I mean, Captain Phasma's a white woman, but yeah. So there's things to applaud in this movie, but it's a messy movie, and I think that the bullshit writing is apropos. If I had to give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, I would probably lean closer to thumbs up than I would thumbs down. But I'm gonna stick with bullshit for our verdicts.
Okay. Do you want me to press the bullshit thing again then? I don't.
Did you already do it?
I did, but I'll do it again. I don't know if you guys can hear it. So.
I didn't hear it.
It'll be on the recording, but I guess it's kind of quiet on your end. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, it's funny. We were chatting about this a little bit in text, and I'm surprised you didn't say it outright, Bo. But I thought it was in some ways the most apt thing I've seen said about Star Wars, and so concise. What Bo said, it's a good movie that is very, very disappointing, and I'm like, that really captures it so succinctly, and it just nails it to the heart of it. Because I was like, okay, I'll just say it, bullshit too. It's unanimous, obvious. I can't say it's bad because there's a lot of good stuff in it. I liked a lot of it. It's entertaining. If I wasn't nostalgically attached to some of these characters, maybe it'd just be good. But that's not the world we live in. Everyone knows who Luke Skywalker is. There's so much there, and I felt like they didn't do. And I wasn't looking for just like all gold. I just felt like it was a resource that they had, and they didn't use it, and that's kind of bullshit. It was just like too eager. I just felt like they were just too eager to maybe. But Bo said, I agree with Bo a lot. It's just like they didn't do Luke justice, and even though that scene, my favorite scene, is Luke like coming back, and it is pretty awesome. Like, I'm super divided. Divisive film. Yeah. I say bullshit, but it was entertaining. What can you say?
Yeah. I think there was a thought they meant to say on the show at some point, and I'm just going to say briefly here, is I expected to feel bad or feel moved, but I didn't expect to not feel anything. And the thing I was holding it up to was like Blade Runner, which was like, I found it to be an incredibly moving film to me. I don't know if that's fair to Star Wars or not, but that's certainly why I didn't give it a good rating, because the film didn't move me except anger, so.
Yeah, and me too. Like, I felt like I said, it's
the weight of the dark side.
I thought about this movie a lot after, as I think we all have.
Yeah. And
just trying to trust my emotions, I was like, I felt not good about it. It did not feel good. And I'm not saying it was their job to make me or anyone else feel good, but in that way that was hard to pin down, which is the whole unsatisfying. And it's not like, I'm not saying give me what I want. I'm saying do right by something. There's a lot of ways to do that. A lot of challenging ways too. Like, there's, it's a choose your own adventure thing. It could have gone a million different ways. It's not quite the direction I would have chose, but I respect a lot of what they did. A lot.
I have a quick question for you guys before I move into the thing. I know we've done verdicts. This is also one of the only Star Wars main films that takes place like 8 and 9. Or 7 and 8 take place like days between each other, whereas it's usually a period of time that elapses between them. Does that make it weird a little bit, or no? Was that fine?
Oh, wasn't that also one of the big holes in the whole thing? Was it like,
I never think about that stuff.
The timeline stuff, well, I always feel like that's weak too when people don't, because if you start looking at the timelines of things, you're like, this all doesn't make any sense. But you can suspend
disbelief to be like, maybe she spent her timeline on the planet was like 5 days. Meanwhile, the chase is a 24-hour timeline.
Yeah, and that stuff doesn't work when you're flipping back and forth between. It sounds like it seems like she's on this island.
You're thinking about it too hard. See, that's the exact type of question that I'm just like, you're thinking about it too hard, and that's what I find very frustrating about these movies and their reception, and even doing a show like this. Like, when I went into that theater, I wanted to think about this. I wanted to enjoy it going down as a candy confection, much in the way that Bo sort of said he actually was successful in doing. I wasn't even successful in doing that. And I definitely was successful in doing that with The Force Awakens. And it was only after leaving The Force Awakens that I went through the emotions that Bo is going through, where I was like, shit, man, I'm depressed. All my favorite characters had shitty lives for the past 30 years. But at the time I was watching The Force Awakens, like when you look at the scenes in The Force Awakens of like Rey and Finn flying the Millennium Falcon, and then the gun gets locked and and she's got to pull this evasive maneuver, and they're flying through this crashed Star Destroyer. There's so many like rip roaring, like, yeah, moments that it's just a really fun thing to watch. And this movie is much more, like emotionally complicated, of characters going through arcs and issues and stuff like that. But there isn't as many of those it opens with a rip roaring scene with Poe, but there aren't really that many of those types of scenes. And for me, I found the emphasis, everybody's emphasis afterwards has been on overthinking what is a space fantasy at heart. And for me, again, it reflects back on, I think, less on the movie and more as me as an adult. And that I don't want to say I've outgrown it, but I've definitely made it so that I can enjoy it the way that I used to.
I think I didn't have a problem suspending disbelief on the timeline when I started thinking about it. My question was more to do between movies and not in the movie.
Yeah.
So
that's hard to judge too, because it's like, but I mean, I think it's a tricky thing when you're writing this like a screenplay. It's like you got to think about this stuff, and that's, suspension of disbelief is like a fine balance, and it's like one thing can throw it off. It's kind of like having a dream, and sometimes you might realize you're having a dream, and you're like, oh, it's kind of busts the fantasy. And there was a bit of that between the whole like they have like 6 hours of fuel left, and then these guys are going to this like.
Yeah, no, you clearly have to suspend.
I'm like,
you clearly have to suspend your disbelief for all of that. That's a conscious choice that's made for me.
I felt like the other movies, it's like usually things happen and there's periods where you don't know what happened, so you don't know how much time has elapsed. Whereas this one, it was pretty much like they told us times 6 hours, and you're like, okay, well now I know that much, and I know these people have to do this thing and that, and you're like, oh, this is getting a real stretch here. But if they hadn't have done that, if they had made it it's very simple things you could do. So stuff like that. I meant you be like, oh.
Was I not clear? It was the time between movies.
I know, but it made me think
I keep
of some
saying,
other time.
what do you think about the time between movies? And we keep talking about the time in the movie, and I'm like, anyways. I forget about it. I've lost interest in the question. You guys answered.
But
we have to close the show now.
One thing I'll say is there's a lot of talk about this, how the people talk about how The Empire Strikes Back was received in theaters, and they're comparing the reaction to this one. And a lot of people, when Return of the Jedi came out, they said, oh, they got their mojo back that they had lost. Critics and audience members it's only in time that people have been so receptive to The Empire Strikes Back. And a lot of people are questioning if that's going to be the case with this film. This will be the film that they'll look back, because it's true. We are experiencing it as it happens, but in the future, it's going to be seen as the middle episode of a 3-part arc. Yeah, and will it fit better then? I don't know.
It could be better or not. I think it rides on the strength of the next one, but I ultimately don't think it's part 2 in a 3-part series. So I think The Empire Strikes Back is not a good. Personally, my opinion is not a good comparison. This is part 2 of a 15-part saga. So, all right, if you want to write a 15-part email to us, don't review it and cut it down and send it to goodbadbull@gmail.com. We'd love to get your emails and your thoughts about Star Wars The Last Jedi, especially if they're in agreement with my feelings. No, just kidding. Send whatever you want into us. It's all good. We will read them. And if we get enough, I'm kind of hoping we spark a lot of controversy, because we could just do a whole episode on mail on this. I'd be willing to do that. So anyways, goodbadbull@gmail.com. If you're interested, subscribing to the show, you're listening to this and don't know how you got here, want to find out how you can get more, goodbadbull.com. There you can subscribe on Stitcher, Google Play, the iTunes Store, the podcast app. And there's an RSS feed, or you can just bookmark the site and visit it and listen there. And we're also on the YouTubes if you prefer the video version. Finally, we'd like to thank our supporters over on the patreon.com/goodbadbull. This is where this show is paid for by listeners, the generous support of our listenership, who are effectively our bosses. and they help pay for our server costs, and we really appreciate that. So if you'd like to become a supporter of the show, you can go to patreon.com/goodbadbull and help support today for $1 a month. That's like less than half of a price of a large cup of coffee a month. That's not a bad deal at all for great podcast entertainment. All right, we're going to get out of here. I'm going to do it quickly and not let people answer. Well, no, you guys are going to get ornery if I do. I'm Bo Schwartz on Twitter. Follow me there. Crofton, if our listeners want to follow you, where can they do it?
May the force be with them. At Crofton Sears on Twitter.
All right, and Michael Hodgins, if our listeners want to find you, where can they do so?
It'd be just about as hard as it was to find Luke on that island in the middle of nowhere. Of course,
that's your answer.
It's at ML Hodgins. Yeah.
You should have said they're gonna find me sucking the green milk teat of whatever those things are called. By the way, also funny. A really good part of the movie. Like, oh, that's also why it reminded me of you. That scene came up, and I'm like, it's Jedi Mike again, tapping the whale.
Why did that make you think of
Was that the blue milk from Aunt Beru's blue milk? Was that the same milk from Aunt Beru?
I think so.
That'd be pretty funny
I think
if it's
so.
Like, he's like, I'm going to find the Jedi thing. Wait, let me just stop at Tatooine and get one of those blue milk cows. I love that stuff. And then he sets them on the side of the island.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
Luke Skywalker loves the blue milk.
I loved that moment. The blue milk moment was tops.
Yeah.
So, and it just reminded me of you because you're kind of, pro nature and you tap maple trees. It's not a far stretch to tap an udder.
I did like so much of the Luke stuff on the island. It was good.
Yeah. All right. So anyways, we're going to cut it off there because I don't want to have to figure out where to outro on a 2-hour show. And it's literally clocking in at 2 hours, ladies and gentlemen. The longest episode of Good, Bad, or Bullshit in history has happened tonight.
And we'll have the least listens, probably.
So on behalf of Mike and Crofton, I'd like to say, may the Force be with you.
Always.
Okay, so
I gotta let you guys go, unfortunately. Right off. It's too late now.
I'm stopping the recording. I just wanted to... Okay. Thank you guys for a great show. That was good.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
That was good. That was entertaining. Live stream, thank you for watching.
See ya.
Oh, okay. Thank you for watching live stream. I'm going out because I'm done. So thank you. See you soon.
Are you talking to